John Mitchell's return to Somber Hollow was marked by a mix of nostalgia and purpose. A wiry man in his early 30s, his deep-set hazel eyes had seen more than their fair share of the world. The memories of his childhood were sharply contrasted against his short-cropped dark hair, a testament to the urban life he'd embraced. The skin on his hands, slightly roughened by city labor, gripped the steering wheel as he drove past familiar landmarks. As he entered the town, the fiery display of the autumn trees welcomed him, their burnt orange and crimson leaves shimmering in the afternoon sun. Those same trees, their branches swaying in the light breeze, cast eerie and dancing shadows on the ground, a spectacle he remembered watching as a boy. Somber Hollow hadn't changed much. The buildings, the streets, and the faces he glimpsed all held traces of memories. Memories of his youth, of innocent days playing in the fields, and of his family, especially his grandmother. She had been a cornerstone of his life, and her recent passing had left a void in his heart. John's return wasn't just a trip down memory lane. His primary reason was to settle his late grandmother's estate, a task he knew would be heavy with emotion. The old Mitchell house held decades of history, and as he pulled into its driveway, the weight of his responsibilities pressed down on him. Yet, alongside the impending tasks, a small part of him was eager to reconnect with his roots and the memories that had shaped him. John chose Rosie's Diner for his first meal back in town, not only for its nostalgic comfort food, but also for its reputation as the community's central hub. The neon sign above the entrance flickered with age, and the bell above the door jingled softly as he stepped in, alerting those inside of his arrival. Almost instantly, familiar faces turned towards him, their eyes lighting up with recognition. "John? John Mitchell? Is that really you?" exclaimed Sarah, a childhood friend, as she rushed over to embrace him. Tom, another schoolmate, clapped him on the back with a broad grin. "Never thought we'd see you back here, city boy." But as they caught up on old times, John couldn't help but sense an undercurrent of unease among them. The laughter was a little too forced, the pauses a touch too long. The diner, usually filled with jovial conversations, had an almost hushed atmosphere. Curiosity getting the better of him, John probed. "What's going on? Why does everything feel so tense?" Tom and Sarah exchanged glances, and after a moment of hesitation, Sarah spoke in a low voice. "It's probably just silly superstitions, but with Halloween around the corner, the whole town's spooked. There are tales of a shadowy figure lurking on the outskirts of Somber Hollow." She leaned in closer. "And there have been some unexplained deaths. No one knows what's causing them." John felt a shiver run down his spine. He had returned to Somber Hollow expecting a quiet retreat from his city life. Little did he know, he was stepping into a brewing storm of mystery and fear. John had always loved his grandmother's home. It was an old, Victorian-style house with creaky wooden floors, ornate carvings, and tall, drafty windows. Stepping inside, memories of his childhood summers washed over him. The smell of baked cookies, the sound of Grandma humming a tune. It was a sanctuary of warmth and love. He began sorting through her things, the melancholy task bringing with it waves of nostalgia. It was while exploring her study, a room filled with dusty books, fading photographs, and worn-out furniture, that he found a leather-bound journal hidden in a drawer of her vintage oak desk. Curiosity piqued, John opened it to find his grandmother's elegant handwriting. The earlier entries were filled with everyday musings, stories of young John's exploits, and memories of times gone by. But as he flipped through the pages, the tone of the writing started to change. The cheerful recollections gave way to anxious scribblings and fearful accounts. One entry, dated October 31st, decades prior, caught his eye. It read, "The town is in dread once more. The silent shadow is said to have returned. Every Halloween he strikes, leaving behind only terror and death. How can we forget the year when the Thompsons, the good-hearted baker and his wife, were found in their home, with no marks but expressions of sheer horror etched on their faces?" Further entries detailed more incidents, each more chilling than the last, and each occurring on Halloween night. Whispers of this deadly figure had passed into local legend, with many believing it was merely a story meant to scare children. But to find it in his grandmother's journal, with such earnest fear and concern, made John realize that there might be some terrifying truth to the legend of the Silent Shadow. John was startled when he ran into Clara outside the local grocery store. Time had only added to her beauty. With hair like a flaming autumn leaf, she stood out in the small town, her face a constellation of freckles that he remembered tracing with his finger as a child. Her green eyes still held that same mix of mischief and intelligence. They hugged, the embrace lingering a moment longer than usual, rekindling old emotions. "John," she began hesitantly, once they caught up a bit, "there's something I need to tell you, something I've seen." Her voice quivered, which was unusual for Clara, always the brave one in their duo. She recounted the previous night, when she had glimpsed a shadowy figure outside her bedroom window. The silhouette had no distinguishable features, but its mere presence had filled her with an indescribable dread. Remembering their childhood, John suggested their old treehouse as a rendezvous point. Nestled deep within the woods, it was a place that held memories of shared secrets and whispered tales. The wooden structure, now aged and slightly worn out, had been their sanctuary from the world's troubles. As they climbed up, the familiar creak of the wooden steps took them back to their younger days. Inside, surrounded by carved initials and childhood mementos, they felt a sense of safety. With the outside world momentarily shut out, they sat down to piece together the mystery of the shadowy figure that seemed to be haunting Somber Hollow once again. The walls of the treehouse, which once seemed impenetrable in their childhood fantasies, now felt paper-thin. The rustling grew louder, and the sounds of soft, deliberate footsteps echoed from the forest floor. John and Clara exchanged nervous glances, their breaths shallow and fast. Pushing aside the old, dusty curtains, John cautiously looked out from a tiny window. The moon, full and luminous, cast long, stretching shadows that played tricks on the eyes. Among them, however, one was darker and more substantial. It moved with eerie grace, coming to a stop directly below their hideout. The distinct glint of a blade, sharpened to a deadly point, reflected the moon's cold light, sending shivers down John's spine. Clara, her fingers clutching John's arm, whispered, "Is it him? The Silent Shadow?" John pulled her close, trying to project calmness though his heart raced. "We need a plan," he murmured, his mind racing. The legends never spoke of the Silent Shadow venturing this deep into the woods. Yet, here he was, or at least someone who wanted the town to believe he was the mythical killer. The night's wind, cool and foreboding, howled through the trees, making the leaves whisper secrets of their own. The duo tried to recall any escape routes they'd built into the treehouse as children. Time seemed to slow, each tick of John's wristwatch deafening in the quiet, tense space. Suddenly a soft melody floated through the air, a lullaby their grandmothers used to sing. It was both comforting and eerie, given the circumstances. Was this a new tactic of the Silent Shadow, or was another force at play in the depths of Somber Hollow? In the dimly lit office of the sheriff's station, John and Clara sat across from Sheriff Daniels. The aging lawman leaned back in his creaky chair, the weight of decades of responsibility evident in his tired blue eyes. The walls were adorned with old photos and commendations, bearing witness to years of service. Clearing his throat, Sheriff Daniels began, "You have to understand, this isn't just a scary story to keep kids away from the woods. It's rooted deep in this town's history." He took a deep breath, his fingers drumming anxiously on the wooden table. Long before this town was even established, there was a tribe here. Among them was a skilled warrior, known for his swiftness and his silent ways, hence the name Silent Shadow. Legend has it that he was betrayed by his own, for reasons lost to time. They bound him, leaving him in the heart of the forest on a Halloween night, hoping the spirits would claim him. Daniels paused, his gaze distant as if he could see the ancient scenes play out. But instead of dying, he made a pact with the forces that dwell in the shadows. Every few generations he returns, hungry for vengeance. His spirit won't rest until the town pays for its age-old sins. He leaned in, his voice a hushed whisper. They say the only way to appease him is a sacrifice, a life willingly given to atone for the past. John's hands tightened into fists, anger and disbelief battling within him. "You can't honestly believe in this old legend, can you?" Sheriff Daniels looked at him, sadness evident in his gaze. Whether I believe it or not isn't the issue. The fact is, people are scared, and history has a way of repeating itself in Somber Hollow. Clara, her voice shaky, asked, "But how can we stop it, Sheriff?" He sighed deeply. "That's the million-dollar question, Clara, and truth be told, I'm not sure, but we need to figure it out before Halloween night is upon us." Resolute in their mission, John and Clara gathered a group of the town's most courageous residents. Among them was Marcus, a burly blacksmith with a booming voice and a heart of gold, and Evelyn, a wise elderly woman known for her knowledge of the town's history and folklore. Together they formed a tight-knit team, each bringing their unique skills and insights. Over the next few days, they meticulously devised a plan. Using whispered rumors and clues from the journal, they figured the town square, with its old clock tower, would be the most symbolic place for the Silent Shadow's revenge. Evelyn recalled an ancient ritual to bind restless spirits. "It's a long shot," she admitted, her wrinkled hands shuffling through an old leather-bound book, "but it might just work. We'll need to form a circle and recite the incantation exactly at midnight." Marcus, leveraging his blacksmithing skills, crafted iron chains believed to weaken supernatural entities. "Iron has always been believed to repel malevolent spirits," he explained, as he fashioned the heavy links. To lure the Silent Shadow, they used a combination of bait, from burning specific herbs that the spirit might be drawn to playing eerie old town tunes on a gramophone, echoing through the desolate streets of Somber Hollow. As Halloween night approached, the town square was bathed in an eerie orange glow from the strategically placed lanterns. The wind carried whispers of old legends, and an ominous cloud cover made the night exceptionally dark. The townsfolk, their faces a mix of fear and determination, stood in a circle, each holding a piece of the iron chain, ready for the confrontation that would decide the fate of Somber Hollow. The dense fog, swirling in tendrils, seemed almost alive as it played tricks on the eyes of the townsfolk. Every shadow, every shift in the mist caused hearts to race. The lantern's once reassuring glow now created more shadows than they dispelled, casting eerie, elongated silhouettes on the cobbled streets. The Silent Shadow was aptly named, moving with an almost supernatural grace. It was as if he were a part of the fog itself, materializing and disappearing with ghostly unpredictability. Every now and then, the glint of his blade would catch the faint light, a deadly beacon in the thick haze. John, Clara, Marcus, and Evelyn tried to coordinate their moves, signaling to each other, whispering hurried plans. But every time they thought they had the Silent Shadow cornered, he would vanish, only to appear behind them, his haunting presence felt rather than seen. The once confident group felt their resolve waver. The town's legends hadn't prepared them for this eerie reality. The Silent Shadow seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. The chilling laughter that echoed intermittently through the fog only heightened the terror, causing even the bravest among them to glance over their shoulders. Evelyn began to chant, her voice a clear melodic contrast to the fog-muted sounds of the square. As she chanted, the iron chains held by the townsfolk began to glow with a soft, ethereal light. The Silent Shadow, sensing the power of the ritual, increased his attacks, trying to break the circle. But the townsfolk held firm, their unity and determination shining through the darkness and the fear. The game of evasion and pursuit seemed to stretch for hours, though in reality it was only minutes. Every second felt drawn out, every breath heavy with anticipation. The fog, the chimes, the glinting blade, and the ethereal glow from the chains all contributed to a night that Somber Hollow would never forget. With the moon as the only witness, the scene unfolded with heart-pounding intensity. The Silent Shadow, once an enigmatic and ghostly figure, was backed into a narrow alley between two old stone buildings. His every exit was blocked by townsfolk holding the glowing chains, their faces a mix of determination and disbelief. As he lunged at John, their bodies collided with the force of desperation and surprise. They grappled fiercely, John's adrenaline giving him the strength to fight off the killer's advances. Clara and Marcus rushed to assist, trying to disarm the assailant. In the tussle, the mask, a grotesque and haunting visage, was torn away, revealing the sweating, frantic face beneath. Gasps of shock rippled through the gathered crowd as the identity of the man became clear. Sheriff Daniels, the very man who was supposed to protect him. The stout man with the authoritative demeanor, always projecting an air of calm control, was the terror that had plagued their town for so long. Eyes wide with disbelief, Clara whispered, "But why, Sheriff? Why?" Breathing heavily, Sheriff Daniels spat out his confession, his eyes wild with desperation. This town needed a legend, a fear to unite them. With everyone living in terror of the silent shadow, they looked to me for protection, for guidance. That fear gave me power, authority. No one dared challenge me or the law. The silent shadow made me indispensable. John, still recovering from the shock, glared at the sheriff. "You terrorized innocent people, let them live in fear, all for your twisted sense of control?" Sheriff Daniels sneered. "Fear is a potent tool, John, and I wielded it masterfully." The revelation sent shivers down the spines of the gathered crowd. The man they had trusted, turned to for safety, was the very monster they feared. The town of Somber Hollow would never be the same again. As the townsfolk processed the chilling revelation, a heavy silence settled upon the alley. Clara, her face etched with betrayal, stepped forward. "We trusted you. We saw you as our guardian, our protector, and all along you were the monster in the shadows." Sheriff Daniels, now with nowhere to run and no mask to hide behind, seemed smaller, the weight of his actions crushing him. "I thought I was invincible," he murmured, his voice laced with regret. "I believed the legend would keep me safe, that no one would ever find out." Marcus, one of the town's elders, spoke up, his voice firm. "The power of a legend lies not in the fear it instills, but in the hope and unity it brings. You misused the story of the Silent Shadow, turned it into a tool for your own gain. But now, your reign of terror ends." The townsfolk bound Sheriff Daniels with the glowing chains, symbols of the hope and unity they now embodied. He was taken to the town jail, awaiting a trial that would surely seal his fate. Somber Hollow, having faced its deepest fears, emerged stronger and more united than ever. The legend of the Silent Shadow would live on, but not as a tale of terror. Instead, it would be a story of resilience, of a town that faced its darkest hour and emerged triumphant. In the years that followed, every Halloween, the townspeople would gather in the square, lanterns in hand, to commemorate the night they unmasked the Silent Shadow. The event became a testament to their collective strength, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming fear, unity and hope could prevail.